Philozoopia.
Welcome to the deep dive. We really try to get into some fascinating ideas here, help you make sense of, well, the world today. And today is definitely one of those. It's a bit of a mind bender, actually. We're looking at how what we think of as real might be way more complicated than it seems. We're diving into Jean Baudrillard's Simulacra and Simulation from way back in 1981. It's pretty groundbreaking stuff. We're going to unpack his ideas, which can be pretty challenging, about how signs, models, symbols, they don't just represent reality anymore. They kind of create it. And this leads to what he calls the hyperreal. So our mission today, explore how all this simulation stuff, this hyperreality, shows up in popular culture. That feels like the best place to see it, right? We're talking movies, music, ads, even the places we go. We want to see how these things aren't just mirrors, but are maybe actively shaping our world. And maybe even hiding the fact that the real original thing is kind of vanished.
Exactly. And I'm here to help unpack some of the denser bits, maybe draw some connections you might not expect. The goal really is to give you a kind of shortcut into these ideas. They've been super influential, but let's be honest, Baudrillard isn't always the easiest read. But what's amazing, really, is reading this book from the early 80s. It feels so incredibly relevant now, like he was writing about our time.
Okay, so let's get into it. Baudrillard starts with this allegory, right? Based on a story by Borges.
That's right, the Argentinian writer Jorge Luis Borges. He had this fable about cartographers, map makers in an empire, who made a map so detailed, so perfect, it literally covered the entire territory.
Right, and in the original story, as the empire crumbled, the map frayed too, but Baudrillard, he does something different with it.
He totally flips it.
Yeah.
He says today, it's not the map decaying on the territory, it's the territory itself, the real world, that's like shredding and rotting across the map. So abstraction, making copies or representations. It's not about mapping something that exists anymore. Simulation, for him, isn't just making a copy. It's, and this is his phrase, the generation by models of a real without origin or reality, a hyperreal.
Wow. Okay, so the model comes first.
Precisely. That's the precession of simulacra. Precession meaning coming before. The map precedes the territory. The model generates the territory.
So it's like, okay, think about maybe music production today. Sometimes the synthesized sound, the model, comes before any real instrument sound is even considered. That model is the starting point.
That's a fantastic analogy, yeah.
Yep.
And what he says is lost is the sovereign difference, that fundamental gap between the real thing and the concept of the copy. Baudrillard says we've basically lost all of metaphysics, the whole idea that there's some stable, objective truth out there for our signs and images to refer back to.
Yeah.
That's gone.
So the original just isn't there anymore.
Or it doesn't matter. The hyperreal is produced from miniaturized cells, matrices, and memory banks, models of control. Think digital code, data, and it's endlessly reproducible. It doesn't need to be rational or true in the old sense. It just needs to be operational.
Operational. Okay, what does that mean exactly for us?
It means it just has to work. It functions within its own system. It doesn't need to measure up against some external reality or truth. It substitutes the signs of the real for the real itself. It kind of blocks any real process from happening by putting this perfect working copy, the operational double, in its place. He says the real will never again have the chance to produce itself.
That's intense.
Yeah. And he makes this key distinction. Dissimulation, that's pretending not to have what you have, like hiding something. Reality is still there, just hidden. But simulation, pretending to have what you don't have, that messes with the whole difference between what's real and what's fake. It makes reality itself this gigantic simulacrum. Not unreal exactly, but sort of, endlessly looping back on itself without reference or circumference.
Okay, that distinction is crucial, and it makes you really question authenticity. This feels like a good point to pivot to pop culture, because where else do we see these illusions, these simulations, more clearly? Let's talk movies. He saw them as these battlegrounds for reality itself.
Absolutely. Apocalypse Now is a huge one for him. He argues Coppola's film isn't just about the Vietnam War. It's almost presented as an extension of the war. He says the war became film, the film becomes war. They're linked by this shared immersion in technology, this common hemorrhage into technology.
And then there's that really wild idea he puts forward that maybe the Vietnam War itself never really happened, not in the way we think.
Yes, deliberately provocative. He suggests it was like a psychotropic dream, just waiting for its ultimate validation, its consecration by a super film like Apocalypse Now, as if the film made the war real in a new way.
So the spectacle sort of overwrites the event.
Kind of. Think about the famous scene with Wagner's music during the helicopter attack. Baudrillard says that's not critical commentary, it's just part of the special effect. It's a total immersion in the spectacle. The film, for him, has this retromegalomania, this excessive, almost meaningless energy, non-signifying furor.
And he actually says the U.S. won the war through the film.
He does. Provocatively, he says, if the Americans seemingly lost the other one, they certainly won this one. Apocalypse Now is a global victory, which is a huge statement about the power of cinema, right? Equating it with, or even putting it above, military power.
Wow, okay. If a film can be a victory, yeah, that changes everything. What about The China Syndrome, another film that seemed to uncannily predict reality?
Right. That film showed, for Baudrillard, the supremacy of the televised event over the nuclear event. And the really eerie part is how the movie depicting a nuclear accident came out right before the real 3 Mile Island incident near Harrisburg.
That timing was uncanny.
Baudrillard calls it a strange precession of a film over the real. Like the real event almost arranged itself to mimic the film, to produce a simulation of catastrophe. He even points out how similar nuclear control rooms look to TV studios, the simulation setting the stage for the real.
And then there's Ballard's novel, Crash. Baudrillard calls it the first great novel of the universe of simulation.
Yeah.
That book is still pretty intense.
So absolutely. Baudrillard focuses on how Crash shows technology not just as a tool, but as a mortal deconstruction of the body. The car crash, the accident, isn't some random event anymore. It's the rule. It becomes, disturbingly, the sex of life.
Merging sex, technology, death.
Yes, but not as a simple perversion. Ballard explores it as a new mode of non-perverse pleasure. Baudrillard highlights the unsettling imagery injured bodies mirroring car parts, creating this new currency of pain and desire.
And you mentioned music earlier, the source notes transistorized music in automobiles being part of that whole hyperreal metallic traffic environment. In the book, it connects back.
It does. It's all part of this immersive, simulated layer. And Baudrillard stresses there's no moral judgment in Crash. Its power lies in this dull splendor of banality or of violence. It reaches a point where these things are so pervasive, they lose their shock value, their moral weight. They just are. It's a resolution of all finality or critical negativity.
So it just presents this reality without commenting on it.
Pretty much. He connects that vibe to other films, too, like Nashville or Clockwork Orange, same kind of detached presentation of violence or banality. He even says things like the energy crisis or ecological concerns in the real world start to feel like their own disaster movie script.
Yeah.
Reality adopting fictional forms.
Okay, so movies create these huge immersive simulations. What about TV? That constant drip of information. Baudrillard had that famous line, right? More information, less meaning.
That's a core hypothesis for him. He argues that the sheer volume and speed of information actually destroys meaning. It neutralizes significance. He uses the example of the Loud Family, that 1971 sort of proto-reality TV show. His take, quote, "You no longer watch TV. It is TV that watches you."
What does he mean by that? TV watches us.
It signals a shift in control.
No.
It's not like the old panopticon idea, the prison tower, where the guard might be watching you, so you behave. Now, he argues control is about deterrence. The media simulation is so total, so overwhelming, you don't even look for the real behind it. You're just absorbed by it. It watches you, incorporates you.
So it's not informing us, it's managing us, almost.
In a way, yes.
Yeah.
He pushes McLuhan's "the medium is the message" further. He says the medium itself dissolves, volatilized as such.
Yeah.
Media don't create social connection, he claims, but the opposite, the implosion of the social and the masses.
Inclusion, meaning it all just collapses inward.
Yeah, into this hyperreal nebula, where you can't tell the difference between the media representation and the real thing.
Yeah.
Critical distance, dialectical intervention becomes impossible. You're just in the nebula.
And advertising, it feels like the ultimate example of this surface-level meaning.
But totally. He says ads absorb everything, all original cultural forms, all determined languages, precisely because they have no depth. They're instantaneous and instantaneously forgotten. Ads are the degree zero of meaning, and that's why they win out over everything else.
And they're not even just selling products anymore.
Exactly. He says advertising has become its own commodity. It's not just a tool, it's just there. It's entered our customs, but escaped any real social or moral framework. It just exists as this constant shimmering surface.
Like Las Vegas, which you mentioned he talks about.
The perfect example. He pictures it rising whole from the desert in the radiance of advertising at dusk.
He says advertising there effaces the walls, effaces the streets, effaces any support and any depth. You're just plunged into this stupefied, hyperreal euphoria, a city literally built of signs.
This paints a picture of a society that feels very controlled. Maybe not overtly, but through this pervasive simulation. What about social control, what he calls cryptic violences?
Well, his take on Watergate is fascinating here. He doesn't see it as a genuine scandal exposing corruption,
No. How does he see it?
as a simulation of scandal, staged almost for regenerative ends, a way for the system to pretend to expose corruption and thus reinforce its own legitimacy. He calls it a prodigious operation of intoxication, designed to re-inject political morality precisely to hide the fact that, at its core, capital operates beyond that kind of morality. It needed a fake scandal to hide the real scandal, which is that there isn't one. It's just how the system works. That's a really cynical view, but consistent with his argument. What about the Beaubourg Center in Paris? The Pompidou, that inside-out building?
He sees it as another monument to simulation, a monument to the games of mass simulation, like an incinerator absorbing all the cultural energy and devouring it.
An incinerator?
Yeah, he compares it to the monolith in 2001, a space odyssey, just absorbing everything. He argues its whole design, like a nuclear plant, sets up this system of maximum security, of deterrence that spreads out into society. The architecture itself screams that our time is about fleeting moments, not duration.
But people flock there. Isn't that engagement with culture?
Baudrillard has a much darker view. He says the masses rush there to enjoy this execution, this operational prostitution of a culture finally truly liquidated. He argues their very presence is deadly and catastrophic for the culture supposedly housed there. The masses become the agents of the execution of this culture, turning it into just another spectacle to be consumed and forgotten.
Wow. So the audience participates in the destruction.
In his view, yes. And he links this to hypermarkets too, big box stores. He calls them models of controlled socialization, places that gather all the dispersed functions of the body and of social life into one controlled space, an operational simulation of social life. Another stage set.
Okay, this simulation seems to affect everything, right down to the individual, the self, the body. You touched on cloning earlier?
Right. Cloning, for him, is the ultimate materialization of the double by genetic means.
Yeah.
And the consequence. The abolition of all alterity, all difference, and of any imaginary. He mentions that story of the first supposed clone child from its father's cell. This bypasses mother and father, replaces them with a matrix, a code. Its birth based on a functional, coded process, purged of all aleatory sexuality. Randomness is gone.
The body just becomes information, data to be copied.
Exactly. An abstract and genetic formula, just waiting for serial propagation. He explicitly links it to Walter Benjamin's ideas on mechanical reproduction of art. But now, the original no longer even exists, and he makes that chilling connection again. The endless copying of identical cells is like the pathology of cancer. Uncontrolled, meaningless replication.
Goodness. And holograms. They seem like the ultimate attempt to perfectly replicate reality.
But that perfection is exactly the problem for Baudrillard. He says holograms, by getting so close to perfect 3D reproduction, paradoxically make us aware of something else, like a fourth dimension as a hidden truth. The paradox is, the closer one gets to the perfection of the simulacrum, the more evident it becomes how everything escapes representation.
So the perfect copy reveals how impossible perfect copying is.
Kind of. When something is simulated too perfectly, it becomes more true than the true. It's already too exact. It's not just accurate, it's a transgressive truth. It pushes beyond reality itself, and that has a kind of murderous power. It kills the real by being too real.
Okay, my head is spinning a little. If simulation is this pervasive, if even truth becomes transgressive, what happens to reason, to institutions? He says the university is in ruins. Power is in ruins.
Yeah, he claims the system dismantles itself, puts an end one by one to all its axioms, to all its institutions. It even incorporates its own death. He looks back at May '68 in France, the student protests. He says the students weren't trying to save the university. They brandished its cadaver to challenge power. They were exposing its emptiness.
Accelerating the ruin almost.
Exactly. And he finds a strange kind of parallel, or maybe a premonition, in animals.
The animals, how do they fit in?
He talked about the silence of animals, arguing they've sort of gone down this path of liberal extermination before us. Think about industrial farming. He points out the morbid anxiety, the stress, the physical ailments, ulcers, heart attacks, cancers in factory-farmed animals.
That's horrifying.
It is. And he sees their suffering, their suicidal anomalies, as a kind of failure of industrial reason. Their silence, Their inability to be fully integrated into the productive system becomes a form of resistance.
A resistance through breakdown.
And he critiques our attitude towards them, too.
Yes.
Our sentimentality toward animals, he says, is a sure sign of the disdain in which we hold them. We treat them either as pets, a racially inferior world for affection, or as objects for experimentation and extermination. It reflects our own detachment. He contrasts this with how animals used to represent metamorphosis, connection to territory, cyclical time. Things are linear. Expansive culture has lost.
So if institutions are crumbling and even animals offer this kind of morbid resistance, what about us, the masses? You mentioned we're caught in a double bind.
Right. The system tells us, be an individual, be autonomous, but also be a good consumer, be a passive object, fit in. So traditional resistance focuses on being that active subject liberation, fighting back. Baudrillard finds that maybe less effective now. He argues for the power, maybe even the superior power, of object practices. Things like childishness, hyperconformism, total dependence, passivity, idiocy.
So acting like an object is resistance. How?
It's about the refusal of meaning. It's a strategic resistance of the refusal of meaning and of the spoken word. Or, alternatively, it's a hyperconformist simulation, basically, mimicking the system's demands so perfectly, so blankly, that you don't actually give it any real engagement or meaning. This is the strategy of the masses. You absorb and reflect, but you don't internalize or believe. It's kind of passive refusal, a silence.
Kind of massive collective shrug.
Sort of. A non-reception. He concludes that meaning is mortal. It dies in this hyperreal environment. There's no grand finale, no apocalypse. Instead, there's this precession of the neutral, of indifference. And what grips us isn't meaning but fascination. He calls it a nihilistic passion, proper to the mode of disappearance. We become melancholic and fascinated by things vanishing, by the emptiness.
And his final challenge isn't about finding truth.
No. He says, theoretical violence, not truth, is the only resource left us. We have to radically attack our assumptions, use theory not to find the truth, but to disrupt the simulation itself.
Wow. Okay. That was quite a journey. We've definitely plunged into a world where the lines are blurred, maybe erased, between real and fake, original and copy, where signs seem to devour meaning, and pop culture, movies, music, ads aren't just reflections, but maybe active engines of this hyperreal state.
Absolutely. And while it's dense and maybe unsettling, hopefully this gives you a framework, a lens to look at the media you consume, the news, politics, even just your everyday interactions with technology. It encourages you to ask, what models are shaking my reality?
Definitely. And maybe this is the final thought to leave you with. If our world really is increasingly built on these models that come before reality, and if our biggest experiences, even war or major cultural events, become like scenarios or simulations, what does it even mean for you to have a genuine experience? How do we find something authentic when, as Baudrillard suggests, even truth itself is playing this game of being more true than the true? Something to think about.
Philozoopia.